Well, we're coming on during in the midst of some pretty big breaking news in the Eastern Conference. But in the meantime, we know the big news around the Cavs the last couple of days is that Ty Jerome will not be back in 2025. What does it all mean for the Cavs moving forward and for the rest of the offseason? We'll talk about it coming up next on the Courtside with the Cavs on SI Podcast. Thanks for jumping on with us here at the Courtside with the Cavs on SI Podcast. Spencer German, Spencer Davies, of course, your co-host here. And as I said, Spence, I know we sort of mapped out what we were going to talk about. And I thought, man, maybe we'll save this for the end. But I actually think we should start with it because it is a pretty damn big deal. Miles Turner headed to the Milwaukee Bucks on a new contract. Sounds like from Shams reporting, he had said he wanted to stay in Indiana. He made that very clear. But Indiana's trying to sort of duck the tax because they know they're not going to be as competitive next year without Tyrese Halliburton. And so they chose not to retain Miles Turner, which is an interesting decision from them. Also, I think there's dynamics here. Yes, the Pacers may be out of that picture, at least for the short term. But I also think there's an interesting thing here where we talked about the East being so wide open, but now the Bucks seem like they're right back in the conversation with this move. So just your initial thoughts on what's obviously a pretty big changing of teams here for a key player from the team that obviously was representing the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals.
It's amazing the difference that 2-3 weeks makes in what your trajectory is. That is just a complete shocker to me, completely out of left field. Miles Turner going to the Pacers' rival too, by the way. Let's not forget that. That's even crazier to me. Not just that he signed for that amount or is going to another team, but that particular team. And that's obviously an indicator that Giannis is probably back in Milwaukee. They get back Taurean Prince. They get back Gary Trent Jr. They're figuring out their offseason, and all of a sudden, hey, no one's talking about Milwaukee for a couple weeks, and they're right back into the saddle in what, again, you just referred to as an open Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
Did not expect to be talking about this morning. Pretty crazy. And then you look at the other stuff around the league.
Well,
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander getting $285 million on his extension after a championship win. You've got some fireworks to start day 2 of free agency.
Yeah, and I was going to say the follow-up here from Shams actually that just came down like as we were starting the show is that the Bucks also are waiving Damian Lillard and they're stretching the remaining amount of his $113 million on his contract over the course of the next couple seasons, the next couple years, I guess, to essentially give themselves the cap flexibility to sign Miles Turner and bring him in as a sidekick to Giannis. This isn't obviously Dame's going to be out most of next season with the Achilles injury anyway, but some team's going to get a chance to sort of scoop him up and potentially play him in some capacity. It's an interesting decision. But it makes some sense. My first thought with like the stretching the money out over a couple years thing, it feels like a very NFL thing to do. That's what they do in the NFL is they like kick the can down the road with these contracts. But yeah, a big sort of a landscape shifting day for the Milwaukee Bucks with these two moves that have just come down here right as we were getting going. So
yeah, just wild to look at, wild to hear about and react to. And I'm glad we're recording during this because you're getting our initial and actual reactions to this. I think with Damian, the writing was on the wall probably just because of the injury and the age.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's a cutthroat business.
Sucks. It really sucks.
They had to probably do something with that. And now you're putting yourself right back into the driver's seat, so to speak. Figure out what you're going to do at point guard. I'm sure that AJ Green's responsibilities will increase and we'll see more ball handling, from maybe younger guys, but that's a bombshell. That's a bombshell start to the day, no doubt.
Umano _2 says Miami will probably pick up Dame now, right? I would assume
even if so, he's hurt. He's not going to be playing for a long time, guys. He'll probably will play in the regular season at some point, maybe in like April, but it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Achilles are not anything to deal with or mess with.
I would assume because of the connections with Dame in Miami previously, that's a likely destination for him. Again, to your point, he probably won't play most of next year. This will sort of be. I know Pat Riley actually is catching a lot of heat in no pun intended, in Miami. I really didn't mean it like that. It just came out that way, I swear. I know he's sort of been the criticized of the last couple of years for missing on like those big fish trade assets that have been out there, KD, etc. So I'm sure as like an ode to the fans, they'll throw him a bone and be like, hey, let's get Dame in here and see what he can do when he comes back from this Achilles injury. But obviously we don't even know if it'll be the exact same player. I do feel for Dame, guy who very much like rallied against his entire career, the ring culture idea, and saying like he was happy where he was. And then he finally sort of gave into it and said like, all right, fine, I'll go chase championships. And it stinks that his 2 years in Milwaukee end this way. Because I thought when they teamed up, like there was a chance Dame could still play at a high level and be a nice sidekick to Giannis and they could go do some things, but it just didn't work out that way. So I guess the last thing on this specifically, before we get to the Ty Jerome stuff and what all this means for the Cavs, how much like adding Miles Turner, as you sort of think about the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference now, Spence, and in a Bucks team, like you said, they still have to figure out the point guard spot. Where do you think they sort of fall now in this Eastern Conference that again does still feel like it's pretty wide open in the grand scheme of things, but there's some changing of the guard here, some shifting in the power, if you will, with the Bucks making a move like this?
Yeah, I think they still have to figure out who's going to run the offense too.
For sure.
I know that you've got Giannis, who's obviously unequivocally the most powerful, strongest, like he is incredible. Like let's not forget that. But you do need someone to help him. You need someone to help him organize an offense, and that's going to be the word that I use a lot too when we talk about Ty Jerome and what the Cavs have going on. But there's some free agents out there. What if Chris Paul is the guy? What if they lean towards Chris Paul?
That'd be crazy.
What if a reunion with Malcolm Brogdon? I'm looking at some of these free agents, point guard wise, and it's probably going to be a very low pool because let's be honest, the free agency pool is pretty, mid-level-ish.
Picked over.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll figure it out. Russell Westbrook's still there. I don't know if you want Russell Westbrook running your offense as a starter for an entire year nowadays, but just looking at who's available, I don't know how much money the Bucks have left, thinking off the top of my head, and it's pretty crazy to me that you can waive and stretch a $113 million amount over 5 years. That's a lot of money, and it'll still be on the books. So that's interesting. Someone just had a great comment on Twitter that it's the NBA's version of Bobby Bonilla. On Bobby Bonilla Day, by the way. So that's pretty crazy.
Happy Bobby Bonilla Day, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
That's pretty funny, actually.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm not sure who's going to be their point guard, but I'm sure that's something they thought about. I'm sure that's something they thought about when they made this move. And a lot of these moves do happen with other things in mind, which
no doubt
probably should segue us into the Cavs because maybe that's the case too.
Yeah, well, and I think that is a perfect segue. We'll see how that all sorts out with the Bucks. I would agree with you. Probably have to see what they do to sort of fill out the rest of that starting five, especially the point guard spot, before we really classify them in any sort of way. But certainly it's the eyeball emoji right now. We're all like, okay, they did something. Now what's going to happen from here? So we'll see what all this looks like. But yes, a perfect segue because we know that the Cavs, when we last jumped on, the Cavs had just traded on Sunday for Lonzo Ball, trading Okoro for Lonzo Ball straight up. And we obviously dissected the move and talked about what it meant, and obviously hit on the fact that if Ball stays healthy, we think this is a good trade for them. We also did say, this is an interesting development in terms of the Ty Jerome conversation. And then, wouldn't you know, a couple hours later, the team signed Sam Merrill to an extension, giving him over $9 million per year as he sticks around as a sharpshooter on this team, who I think, by the way, I don't know how much went into this based off the playoff performances, but I thought Sam, and I know we talked about it in a bunch of our post-games, Spence, I thought Sam looked really good in the postseason, especially from a defensive standpoint. He kind of held his own, and I wondered if that sort of factored into the decision ultimately to be like, hey, we're going to pay Sam and keep him around. We think his 3-point shooting and the defense he can play is valuable. And I think after we saw that move happen, though, Spence, we both kind of understood, okay, this probably spells the end for Ty Jerome. And then that came to fruition yesterday when he officially signed a deal with the Memphis Grizzlies going there. And he signed for less than Sam Merrill signed, which was kind of interesting because there was so much talk about would they go into the tax? Would they go deeper into the tax? Would they give Ty Jerome the $14 million and or the early bird rights money that they could give him to keep him around? And it turned out that wasn't the case. But I think I think you and I have talked a little bit about like what actually went on behind the scenes here and how this all sort of played out. And I think it's easy to kind of see where the Cavs' heads are at with it as they try to make the moves that they actually can make given the restrictions that they're sort of dealing with given being a second apron team.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to really grasp the fact that they did pay more to Sam, for me at least. No matter how much you like him, no matter how much Kenny Atkinson likes, and I'm sure that played a huge role in this. They were probably expecting, and I know that Ty Jerome's side was expecting them to make more like non-taxpayer mid-level exception money. Ty did not get that. Ty got 9-ish, right? I don't know what the math is, 28 million on 3 years, whatever that is. It's somewhere close to 9. 9.2, I don't know. But I think that was kind of maybe overplaying their hand on Ty's side, but I also think the Cavs also might have waited too long. And I don't know what the dynamics there were. Couldn't really get too much on that side. What led to that decision, what led to one or the other. Before free agency started, I know that they were completely in the unknown and what was going to happen with both of them. And, the initial consensus was hopefully we can get back one. And they did. And I think they value Sam more on this roster, right or wrong. And that's a Kenny Atkinson thing. For me, I think with Ty Jerome, when you look at what the number ended up being, that might bite you. They're going to be leaning a lot on Lonzo Ball to stay healthy.
Yeah.
A guy who's played 70 games in the last 4 seasons to stay healthy. That is a risk. We know what the talent level is. We know how good he is defensively. We know he's a ball mover. But that's a risk. It's also a risk, even though we predicted this at the end of the season after Kobe's press conference, that they're going to look to CPJ and they're going to look to Jalen Tyson to play these minutes. Tyrese Proctor might even get a look to try and not replace, but to try and fill the void of what Ty Jerome leaves, which is, a microwave scorer and somebody who can really get that engine going off the bench. Because now you're kind of missing what Ty brought in that sense. So it's going to be by committee, in my opinion. And I think that they took a misstep. I also think that Ty Jerome's camp and his agency might have taken a misstep too. But I don't know what the dynamics behind the scenes were between those two and what the interest was. But Ty Jerome posted on Instagram and then put a smiley face. So he's happy. He's going to end up in Memphis. And I was told that the Grizzlies have liked him for years. And my sense is that with this free agency that the Cavs couldn't sign everyone. So that is it's tough. It's a tough one to take in.
I agree on basically everything you said. It was shocking he didn't get the number he was probably expecting. That was my initial thought when I saw the number, was like, they had to have thought, like there must have been conversations between the two sides where it was like, hey, we think we're getting this. And it just never came to fruition that way. And so that's what led ultimately to the separation here. I think your point is sound on you can't pay everybody. I think the hardest pill to swallow, though, was just like, You had somebody in Ty who was a 6th Man of the Year candidate, who on that second unit was an elite presence for that group and really like the spark of that group. And now you're kind of left wondering, like, okay, what is that second unit going to look like? Especially like you said, if you're hoping or banking on, well, Lonzo Ball is going to be our second unit guy. Well, he has to stay healthy first. And so that's where I think, and I understand why Cavs fans are struggling with this, is they sit and talk about this team. They sit and look at this team, from 4 weeks ago to now. and they're like, well, hey, what is the team going to look like next year? And now you realize Ty Jerome's not there. I get why there's a lot of people wondering, are we worse than we were, even a month ago when we thought Ty Jerome was still potentially going to be on this roster? Because I think that's a valid question. Like Ty did offer so much to this team. It does feel like, to what, going off of what you said, Spence, that Kenny Atkinson like trusts like his system will help essentially produce a player that can do what Ty did, even if it's not Ty Jerome, and that they think Ball can be that guy. And listen, Ball when healthy, I think has shown like he can tout that at this point in his career he's been more consistent than Ty when he's healthy. Like, he has been a reliable player in this league, even more so than Ty has proven he can be for a longer period of time. So I think there's some fairness in that. But again, you're really sort of leaning on will he stay healthy, and so I get where people are looking and being like, well, our second unit might be worse now. Now, there's other things that have to happen, like DeAndre Hunter, if he goes to the starting lineup, maybe Max Strus moves to your second unit, maybe that helps things. We'll see. But I understand where those sentiments are coming from. I guess, like, do you feel, Spence, that, I mean, and maybe I know how you are with these types of questions, so maybe it's not going to be like a fair thing to answer right now till we like really see what all the concoctions of lineups look like and rotations. But do you sort of feel right now that the Cavs are better or worse than they maybe were with Ty Jerome this past season, just on like the surface?
On the surface, worse. I'm okay answering that. I think that's clear. You lose somebody that had that kind of production. He actually played less than 20 minutes per game and had in just ridiculous per 36 numbers.
Yeah.
And he was a 50, 40, 90 type of guy. I don't think he's going to replicate that. It's really hard to shoot that well. And I think I said that on one of our podcasts a couple months ago or a month ago, whatever. I'm losing track of time. But it's really hard to do that again and have the success on the floaters that he had again and shoot the way he did again. But it doesn't mean he can't come close to it. And it doesn't mean that he just loses that part of his game. I think what might have turned the Cavs off was maybe the fact that he didn't have the defensive acumen that they thought, and maybe that he wasn't able to laterally keep up with guys like Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith. That's just complete speculation. That's not anything from talking to anybody. But it's clear, though, that the pros outweighed the cons. And I know that he got outplayed and played out of the rotation in that Indiana series, but I don't think they would make that big of a knee-jerk reaction of a move. But it's unlike the Cavs to think, all right, small sample size, this is who this person is.
Yeah.
But it's tough.
That was going to be my next part of this, because I do feel, listen, I know Sam Merrill didn't shoot amazing in that Pacers series, but I think defensively he stepped up, and we pointed that out, like on numerous occasions. We pointed out that like he was hanging with guys. He was trying to make other plays even when the shots weren't falling for him. I don't know, like I have to think that the playoff performances there did weigh, maybe not heavily, maybe not like that was the end all be all. Cause like this organization, we've talked about it with Kobe. They are not really ones to, like you said, make the knee jerk reaction or like jump to something and draw a conclusion from like a couple game sample size. Right. So I'm not saying it was the end all be all, but I do wonder if they saw how that series played out, saw how Ty maybe got played out of certain situations and just could not hang with certain guys on that Pacers team, that they're chasing, I guess, the image of the Pacers and how they play. But obviously we know the Pacers are going to take a step back this year just by nature of the injury to Halliburton and now no Miles Turner. But like, I can't help but think that at least the playoff performances there played a smaller role, or were part of the math here when they were adding this all together and figuring out who are we going to pay, who are we not going to pay, on top of the other stuff we talked about of like, they probably assumed Ty was going to get more money than they were willing to give him. And as it turned out, he didn't. So I think it was all sort of part of this same bucket of a conversation that they must have had about where to go from here and who to pay and who not. But I have to think the playoff performance at least factored in a little bit here, because you can tout the regular season and he was brilliant. But I do understand where we've sat here on this podcast and talked about how like JA at times got played out of that series. And he's gotten played out of other series in the playoffs, like, which is part of the reason why we said, like, if you're going to break up the core four, he's the guy you look at, et cetera, et cetera. So if we're sitting here talking about it, there's no way in that room. Like, they're not talking about guys and matchups and how they fit certain things they want to do. And I also just think Kenny Atkinson has a lot of confidence that he can find somebody that can do something similar, likely Lonzo Ball, next year if he can stay healthy.
And while you were talking, I actually was kind of thinking back to how Kenny Atkinson talked about Ty Jerome, and this is in no way saying he was disrespectful of him or anything like that.
No.
But do you remember him saying, like, we're just kind of waiting for him to slow down, like, throughout the season?
Yeah.
Like, so maybe there just, like, wasn't a belief in the longevity.
Like a one-off.
I don't know.
Like lightning in the bottle type thing? Yeah, that's fair.
Like, the way that he talked about it, if you go back to listening to how Kenny talked, and I don't know how this would make Ty feel one way or another, but, like, it just sounded like, he's like, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe, this is happening, and I'm so glad it is, and all that stuff. And he was speaking so very, very in favor of Ty, but it also kind of felt like Kenny was like, we're just waiting for this to slow down. Is this a mirage? Like, and I don't know, maybe that played into it too. But real quick, I did want to go into this because I think a lot of people, and I want to clear the air and kind of explain, when you see a lot of these guys signing for $7 million a year, $10 million a year, $11 million a year, that are in Ty's position or in his, what you would consider his tier, remember that the Cavs could only offer what they could offer was the $14 million and up, right? But these other free agents that they didn't have bird rights to, so they had bird rights. They had early bird rights on Ty Jerome. They had bird rights on Sam Merrill. They did not have the bird rights to these guys who were unrestricted in free agency. And I think a lot of people see the amount of money that, say, Tyus Jones signs for $7 million with the Orlando Magic, right? Luke Kennard gets a 1 year, $11 million deal with the Hawks. You see a lot of these deals. Even someone like LaRavia going to the Lakers for 2 years, $12 million. So that's $6 million AAV. A lot of these guys were available, yes, but the Cavs were restricted in what they could do with their money outside of the two free agents that they had. So keep that in mind too when it comes to what's available out there. They are only able to offer the minimum, the veteran minimum contract, and you see that the big men are sliding off the board like crazy. You're not going to find many that can take the minimum that you want. So they're kind of painted into a corner in that sense. You can try to figure out a trade that you can do 1-for-1 or find one that gets you under the apron, which is pretty much damn near impossible. But the big man stuff, because I've been in text threads with a lot of friends, I've been in, figuring out who fits the best. Like, I keep coming back to, they're probably going to bring back Tristan Thompson, and they're probably going to end up bringing somebody in who'd be like another, small range bigs, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe they're still figuring out their two-way situation too. Like, they have some loose ends to tie up, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think the backup big spot still remains a key area they need to address. Listen, ultimately, to put a bow on the Ty Jerome conversation, like, I do agree with you that sitting here today, I would say they're a worse team because we have so many. It's just it's a big question mark with Lonzo Ball. I think if Lonzo stays healthy, I think you can push back on that. If Lonzo doesn't stay healthy, or we're assuming it's the Lonzo who's played 70 games in 2 seasons now, I'm like, yeah, I think they're not as good of a team right now. But listen, I'm willing to see it through. I think they'll, and we both liked the Lonzo deal when it was made on Sunday. We talked about that on the last pod. I do think, to your point, there probably is a little bit of a lightning in a bottle thing here where they're like, we just don't know if Ty's going to be able to replicate this like season after season after season. And so I think that was probably a fact. Everyone always wants there to be like one clear-cut answer as to why something didn't happen. It's never that simple, right? There's always money involved. There's always the player having certain things they're looking for, the team having certain things they're looking for. There's like fit, there's style, there's other moves you're trying to make. Like you said, they're thinking about these. They're like, it's like a chess game. They're thinking like 3, 4, 5 moves ahead on a lot of these things. Like, well, hey, if we go trade for this guy, maybe we can do this with that guy. Like, there's always a lot that goes into it. Do I love that Ty Jerome is in here? No. Like I thought that throughout the season he proved like he's a valuable asset, and we had multiple conversations we tried to enjoy the season, so we didn't bring it up during the season. But as it was kind of winding down, you and I had talked a lot about, off air, not in front of a microphone, about, well, hey, do you think Ty Jerome will come back? And we both kind of said that we thought he would, and it just didn't work out that way. So this close to the door on that, you're moving forward with the other guys here. I think they're, again, really banking on Ball. And I do think there's some interesting conversations to be had about like other areas that they need to address. I want to ask your thoughts on Al Horford, because I've been getting people have been texting me like, how do you feel about Al Horford? And my thing is, somebody was saying they've heard he's not like the best locker room guy, but have you ever heard that? Because I don't know that I've ever heard that. I've always heard like Al Horford generally gets is generally a pretty good fit. I mean, he's stuck in Boston for so long. And he just kind of feels like one of those players at this point who's like old reliable. I also think the fact that he can stretch the floor better than Jarrett can, like I like that part of his game. And I don't know, like to me, if I'm thinking of like a big that makes a lot of sense for this team in a backup role, because we're assuming they're going to use Evan Mobley at the 5 a lot more. They're going to use Jarrett at the 5, of course. And then you're just trying to find somebody who can play some of those minutes for you when maybe you're moving Evan around to do different things. I think somebody like Al Horford actually makes a lot of sense if they were able to bring him in on the vet minimum.
Most definitely. He can stretch the floor. He's obviously able to defend very well still. And he's a champion. So yeah. What more can you ask for?
That is, Spence, how many times do we get on this pod and talk about, and people in the comments, we see the comments, we know. People in the comments are like, hey, we need people with playoff experience. We need those tough guys. Al Horford is that. I know that Tristan Thompson used to take his lunch during the playoffs back in the day, but Al Horford is the guy that has that playoff pedigree that you're looking for. I 100% agree.
Yeah. No, it's just championship pedigree. And, Tristan Thompson has it too. And yeah. Tristan's probably going to be back. I would say damn near locked to be back. But it's different when you have guys that have gone through it. And that's why, that's why Max Strus was one of the Cavs' best players in the postseason, because he's been through that gauntlet too. He hasn't won it, but he's been through that. But yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yes, Game 5, that was unfortunate to happen.
He needed a better performance after sending that text to the group chat. But yeah, it was.
Most definitely. No, I agree with you there. I agree with you that. But all the ones before that.
First, no. Yeah. I agree. I agree. Max, I think, changed his. I think you and I understood how important Max was to this team. I think fans of this team that were sort of like, why is Max Strus still in the starting lineup? Like, I think you saw why for the majority of that playoff run, why he was. Like, he just brings this different energy. You talk about playoff pedigree. You talk about, like, having been there. He brings all that to the table. There's enough meat on that bone where I'm like, I understand why Max Strus is part of this team. So, yeah, I have no qualms about that. But to your point, to the point, like, yeah, somebody like Al Horford, to me, actually, I think makes a ton of sense if he's willing to sign up to come to Cleveland. I would 100% take that guy in a second.
I think so, too. And the only thing that's stopping that, he's got a lot of suitors. A lot of the contending teams want him. I think Golden State was the hot name that was reported this morning by Mark Stein. So, and there's just it's really tough when you're in a competition with teams like that. But it just depends on how you're viewed, what the lens is on your team. Does that second round exit make anybody more hesitant to sign with you on a vet min? Like, that's the other thing you have to think about. And I have, if you give me a second, I have a little bit more on the Ty Jerome stuff, if that's okay.
Yeah.
For me with Ty, as I was saying, it's hard to replace that scoring element. So for me, I think that Lonzo absolutely he might be a better playmaker. In fact, he is a better playmaker. Obviously, absolutely. So that portion will be okay. He can run a second unit.
Yeah.
But can they get a guy to come in, or can they, by committee, replace that surge that Ty brought? I think that's the big question mark. And I think we'll get to the comments, because that's a good kind of way to get back into the conversation, because it's a lot to ask of a Craig Porter Jr. or a Jalen Tyson to come in. Okay, you've averaged this amount your entire career, and now you have to up it by this much, right? And gotta be able to have ball handlers, and you're really kind of strapped if Lonzo's not available, you're down to CPJ and you're down to Proctor. And you're potentially looking at, maybe DG runs with the twos in certain situations. And I saw the comment by Umano that makes a lot of sense too about Evan Mobley handling the ball, but do you want him to do that the entirety of a game? Like that's the thing that you really going to miss with Ty Jerome. So I don't want anyone to undersell Ty's value to what this team was this year. I know that it might be tough to replicate that kind of season, but in general, his skill set and what his abilities are, and to be able to get inside and make all those floaters and to hit those threes in transition, the walk-up threes, and to just ignite this team, you're going to miss that. And you're going to need someone to try to at least replicate it, which you're not going to probably do it with one player only. Yeah. So that's going to be difficult.
Sam's going to be looked at heavily on with that as well because of the contract he signed, because of the fact that they did choose him over Ty. We haven't talked about the elephant in the room at all, Spence. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this because we have completely avoided it. And I feel like we would be doing a disservice if we didn't at least bring it up. But can we just put a kibosh on the LeBron to Cleveland stuff? Because I have so many thoughts on this, like so many, and I don't want to waste time doing all this. But the two things. First of all, to acquire LeBron James at his salary number, it would take literally ripping this team apart. You'd have to include like DeAndre Hunter. You'd have to throw like DG in there. Like you would literally tear this team apart. And you want to talk about like not having depth. Like you would lose a lot of your depth to get to the point because you also have to get under the second apron. You have to remember too. So there's just a lot to consider there. And I don't think that you should do that. But and here's the other thing. I know that Dan Gilbert and LeBron reconciled things when he came back and then they win the title in 2016. But do you really think that the first taste of success that Dan Gilbert gets with like actually building a team the right way through the draft, all those things, he's got this team that's like on the brink of something special. You really think his move to put them over the top is going to be go run and cry back to LeBron and be like, hey, come on back and rescue me. Come on. Like, no, he wants to prove that he did this differently. I'm not saying that him and LeBron still have bad blood. That's not my point. I'm just saying I think he's let that ship sort of sail now. They won their title together. I think he wants to do it without him. And so I don't like, there's no chance that they would ever, I shouldn't say no chance ever, because there's always going to be links between LeBron and Cleveland because it's LeBron and it's where he played and it's his hometown. I get it. Well, Northeast Ohio is his hometown, but at the same time, like I just think it's utterly ridiculous that we always like point back to, hey, this is the guy that needs to save the franchise. And I get it. He's polarizing. I get it. I just think at this stage of his career as a rental, it just does not make sense because he might retire after next year. Like you're gonna blow up your team and like lose all your depth for 1, maybe 2 years of LeBron just to see like if you can actually get over that championship hump when your team already feels like they're in good position to potentially get over that championship hump anyway. It just doesn't make sense. So that's where I'll leave that. I know you got some thoughts, and then we'll work on getting out of here.
I wish that we would have brought this up 2 days ago because that's when I was really just passionate about it, and I was on Twitter.
You were texting about it, I know.
It was in a very respectful manner I was responding to people, just like, $52 million. You have to find a way, one, to get off all that salary before you even think about making a move, because you can't do it with the second apron. You can't aggregate players, so you have to figure out how to move off of those guys. And then you just think about all the guys that you spent years and years developing, and they're right on the cusp. I know that they lost in the second round of the playoffs. I get it. But you're just turning in all that work and all of the progress they've made. First year with Kenny Atkinson, you're still not even close to what their peak is at. And you're going to give all that up for possibly 1 year of a guy who is still the best player in the world. I don't care. Mentally, he's still a physical monster. He's obviously gotten a better jumper over time as athleticism has started to go down. But it's just time to move on. There is a code. I'm going to let you laugh because I want this straight at the camera. There is a codependency in this town with LeBron James that just needs to dissipate. It's insane to me how at every turn, and they associate it too because they're like, oh, 2016, that was LeBron. So that's the same LeBron who's in 2025. That's how the that's how the simple mind works, but it's just not that way anymore. I don't see that LeBron still being that LeBron. I don't know. He takes incredible care of his body. It's just, if they're not willing to give up certain players for Kevin Durant, I don't know. And I think it would be bad business for all teams too across the league to give up all of that for a $52 million salary. That's literally a fourth of a team's payroll.
Yeah.
A fourth of a team's payroll for an unknown. You can keep it as an unknown because there's that. You look at how much pressure that brings along. You want to think that the Cavs are under pressure now. LeBron James comes into the locker room. That increases tenfold on the external stuff. And then I think from a playing perspective, the Cavs would have to completely retool their entire roster. LeBron only plays with a certain type of archetype. You need to be able to be ready to catch the ball on the perimeter, and you need to be able to shoot. I saw Mike Miller and Kyle Korver have a really tough time adjusting to that for half a season. It is not easy to play with LeBron in that sense. And I'm not saying he's a bad teammate or he's a bad he's one of the most unselfish players there is.
Yeah.
But it is a huge adjustment because you got to surround LeBron with 4 shooters. Yeah. And I don't know if the Cavs have all of those shooters right now to play with him. So I know I'm going kind of on a malfunction.
Especially if they had to give up DeAndre Hunter to get him. But yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. And the wing that you were looking for, you would be giving away. And then you'd have no future solutions. And I think people are starting to panic because this CBA is only allowing teams to compete for 2 to 3 years max. And I get that. But you can still, if you're keeping your team together, and there is a way, I think, to navigate this. And teams just haven't figured it out yet. But they will. I know that the Celtics are losing their squad, and that's a shame. They have all that stuff happening, and then they have the injury to Tatum. That sucks. There are teams that are looking to avoid that tax penalty. Like, for example, I don't think the Ty Jerome thing was to avoid the tax penalty. I just think it was a miscalculation on both ends.
Yeah, I agree.
You go back to that, I just think that a lot of these teams are kind of in panic mode. And then there is a new champion every year right now. Every team can compete. You see that the Rockets are going all in, literally all in. The Rockets are 10 toes into the water right now. And on paper, it looks great. I need to see it. I know how much talent is on that team. They should, for all intents and purposes, win it all. But I need to see it. On paper is not a thing anymore, guys. Like, you need you need widespread depth, and they have widespread depth, by the way. They still need to get a little bit better behind their starting guards, I think. But they've got a good team. I'm looking forward to seeing how it looks. But you don't win championships in July. You don't. So you have to see it on the floor. You have to see all that stuff. So that ties it all back into the conversation with LeBron. It's just, you would have to really gut everything. You would have to gut it. Yeah. And it's just it'd be like a Band-Aid. It'd be like a Band-Aid for a completely open wound that needs stitches.
Well, and the two teams we just saw play for the NBA Finals showed you, like, it's not about just like having the best player and, like, you know, it's the big three era is dead, right? Like, those two teams were so deep. That's what you need to win titles these days. And trading for LeBron, I think, would just derail where this roster's at. Again, as much as I've said, like, they need to add some playoff caliber players and guys who have been there. And I can understand making changes, whether it's trading JA to get some pieces back or, even Darius on some, like, I can understand and wrap my head around those things. Adding LeBron, I think, changes too much, even if it's LeBron. I get it. I don't want to be disrespectful to LeBron, but I just, it doesn't make sense for where you're at right now, frankly. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to get across. And I think we both got that across. Real quick, Spence, before we get out of here, scale of 1 to 10, how much are you going to miss the play Amani Bates conversation?
Listen, I wish Amani nothing but the best.
Same.
He is a tireless worker behind the scenes. I got in an argument with somebody on Twitter about this yesterday. Tireless worker behind the scenes. That guy is always, always, always in the gym. He definitely has a lot of talent. There is no question about that. He's just got to find the right spot, find the right opportunity, and I think he will. Nose to the grindstone. That's what I told him. It's just you got to keep your head down and keep going. He's so young yet. He is got his head in the right place. It's just about finding the fit for him. Yeah. And I wish him nothing but the best. And hopefully he lands somewhere where he gets an opportunity, and then we'll be able to see. We'll be able to see and kind of put it to the test. But nothing but good things to say about Emoni Bates. It's just one of those things where there were too many players ahead of him, and it was a numbers game, too many cooks in the kitchen. That's, I think, all it ultimately was. And, best of luck to him going forward.
Agreed. That's well said. Cavs fans, though, if he goes somewhere in balls, they're never going to let Cody Altman hear the end of it. So,
No, I get that. Hey, listen, I can level with them on this. He really never got an opportunity. I don't know if he would have last year because he was drafted under the Bickerstaff regime. So I shouldn't say regime because Kobe and Mike were still in charge, but he was under the Bickerstaff coaching staff. So I don't know if there was a disconnect there. If it was the injury last year, because remember he had to clean up something in his knee and he didn't get started in the G League until winter time. So that might have put him behind the 8 ball. But Kenny Atkinson said it himself, there's a place for Emoni in this league. Yeah. And I think I'll take the word of an NBA coach and people I've talked to around the G League more than I will somebody on Twitter. And I'm not trying to say that as an elitist. I'm just, your opinion versus their opinion, I'm taking their opinion. Sorry.
And I do think if he was going to play, it would have had to be. How many times do we look at the JB Bickerstaff teams and be like, man, they just need options. Like, they need players. Like, that would have been the time to get those reps. With this, like, I have no qualms about, like, looking back on this team and being like, why didn't Emoni Bates play? Well, there are a lot of bodies ahead of him that were contributing to a team that won 64 games. So I'm not going to sit here and like cry over spilled milk in that way. But I agree that in the Bickerstaff time frame, if he had come up, it would have been nice to see what he could sort of bring to the table when you didn't have a lot of other options. But anyway, we are out of time on a tighter schedule today. Otherwise, we would probably do more of the comments. But I think we talked about enough of them, like Umano talking about Ty and the ball.
We can pop them in real quick. Like, we don't have to talk about them, but at least give them the shine.
Beast Grills saying the Bucks are going all in by signing Miles. I think we agree. He also said the East is about to be wide open. Our guy Anthony Meglin talking about Craig Porter Jr. when Spence talked about Craig Porter Jr. Teresa Reeves says Damian's retired. I don't think he's announced that officially. I think he just got bought out or waived, and they're moving the contract money around. But I don't believe he's retired. Maybe that'll happen as a recourse of this, but I don't think that's happened yet. Anyway, we always appreciate those of you who jump in and try to be part of the conversation. We try to bring your comments to the conversation every single week, every single episode. We're going to be on a little bit of a hiatus. I'm on vacation for the next week or so. Spence is going to be out in Summer League. So the plan is once Spence is maybe, the last day he's out there or something or whatever, we'll try to connect and just get a lay of the land on what was going on at Summer League and whatnot. So we look forward to that for sure. But in the meantime, we encourage you as always, follow along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers. Head on over to Cavaliers on SI, our website, si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. And, of course, right here at the YouTube channel where many of you are watching this right now, please subscribe. We appreciate your support as always. We continue to pump out this podcast because we know there are people who are enjoying it, and we appreciate the feedback you guys provide. And we try to bring this thing at least once a week to you. We've had a week with multiple episodes now because of so much going on. So we hope this gives you some content to sort of lean into for a little bit here. We know it's summer, the dog days of summer, but we'll certainly keep it rolling throughout the rest of the summer once things kind of settle down here. So thanks again for watching. For Spencer, I'm Spencer German, and keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. And, of course, this podcast, Courtside with the Cavs on SI.